I do remember one of the, so we're talking about 60s into early 70s as a child. And do you remember when door handles were about 5 feet off the ground? They were way up the door.
Yeah.
They weren't halfway down the door, they were up high. And I remember when we were little, my dad had drilled holes in the door handles and hung strings through them with a little knob on the bottom so you could pull it to open the door.
Only Granda.
So our downstairs, it was a 3-bedroom semi. Downstairs we had a kitchen, a living room, and a good room, or the sitting room as we called it. But from about mid-December you weren't allowed in there because that's where stuff was being stored. But I remember my dad removed the string, so you couldn't reach the door handle, so you couldn't get in unless you sneaked a chair out and stood on it. So it was a bit like that. It all became mysterious and exciting as we got closer to Christmas.
I mean, I still love this now, that on Christmas Eve, that feeling of, going to bed and you're very excited and can't get to sleep. So as the years went on, I began to realise this was a pattern. So Christmas Eve you went to bed and you weren't going to be able to get to sleep, but you needed to get to sleep. What were you going to do? So every week I used to get 2 comics, and one was the Bunty and one was the Sparky. And so from the start of December I didn't read them and I saved them up. So the time it came to Christmas Eve night, I had a little pile of comics underneath my bed, and that's how I used to get myself to go to sleep, because I read the comics until I fell asleep. I grew up and I lived with obviously my mum and dad, but my mum's brother also lived with it, my Uncle Percy. Another aunt and uncle owned a shop called Nabney's, which was in East Belfast, and it was on the corner of Tempmore Avenue, and it was renowned in the whole of East Belfast. If you lived in East Belfast, you had an ornament from Nabney's. So during the year it was a fancy goods shop on one side, hardware on the other, but from September on it was toys. But my memory of that time was really a very busy time for my whole family, because apart from my dad, everybody worked in that shop. And at Christmas time particularly, they were there all the time. So that made it very exciting. But my dad did play a role as well, because the shop had 2 large windows, and my Uncle Percy would have designed what he wanted the window to look like, and my dad built the props for that because he was a carpenter. So he would have been busy maybe from early June getting that ready, and people would have come and stood around the windows to look in. Now they weren't quite Romson Cleaver standard, but they were very good. So I remember that. And as a teenager then, I was allowed to work in the shop at Christmas, and I'd have to say those are some of my fondest memories of Christmas. My job just before I was allowed to be on service duty at the tills and all of that was people in those days used to come in early and pick their toys, right? And then they used to join a Christmas club so that they could pay money in every week to pay for them. So you booked your toy, so whether it was a bike or the latest Cindy or Stabooty or whatever it was, you booked it. Your name and number went on it, and then it went out into a back store. And my job was to organise that. And then when you come in on Christmas Eve or whatever day you come in to get your thing, you come in, you said, oh, my name is so-and-so and I'm number 44. And I was then dutifully sent out to find number 44 and to find everything at number 44 and bring it out onto the counter for the shop assistants then to wrap up. And
so that's quite a high pressure job if anything was missing from number 44's list.
I tell you, there was many a time I had to go back because something had gone down to the back of the shelving or had been pushed over into somebody else's pile. So I learnt very quickly that it was much easier to take their card with them, with all the items there, so that I could check that I have them all, because nobody wanted to be short at Christmas.
Completely. Christmas kind of depended on you.
Depended on me. So I did love that, and I'd have to say that those are some of my really fond memories of being a teenager and was working in the shop.
I did go into the shop on our first Christmas after we started dating, which was end of November 1976. But we had
memory, Adrian?
We certainly didn't have a phone in our house. So when we got out of college for Christmas, I hadn't worked out how I was going to see Janice again, so I ventured into the shop with a Christmas present, was my excuse to come in and see you. And I didn't get the warmest of welcomes because you weren't in the shop, you must have been out sorting
I was
some of
back
those
sorting
things.
stuff probably.
But the family who were running the shop wanted to know, what do you want to see Janice for? Who are you?
This was the present that I got. So this is a teddy bear who's named Elijah. So I'm assuming he's about 45 years old at the minute. He didn't come dressed like this. We've obviously got a little granddaughter now, so she dresses him in whatever she can find. So I think this was once Joel's outfit.
He's aging better than us.
Speak for yourself, Adrian. Well, I have been thinking about this, about presents, and some of the presents that really stood out to me have already been spoken of by other people. So, particularly Spirograph, I think it was Rosie. I just loved the fact that you could make something that looked really good without actually having to think it up yourself. So that was one of my favourite presents, and I remember doing it at a desk that my dad had built. So he had built me a little desk and I used to sit at it and do my spirograph, so that was great. I also really enjoyed Meccano, so I did get Meccano set and I did that. And I did have, I'm sure mine was Barbie as opposed to Cindy. I'm not sure whether that was just the one available in the shop that year.
I was very moved by Carson's Christmas presents because our family would have been similar. My memory of Christmas presents was that none of them ever came in new boxes. Everything was always a little bit torn or a little bit dented or dinged. But I went from Dundonald to North Belfast to school, which required 2 buses, and as a result not a single soul from my secondary school ever knew where I lived, or ever met my parents or my family, or ever visited me. So it meant that I had my real presents, and then I had my imaginary presents, that when I went back to school I could tell them anything I wanted to. So everything came out of shiny boxes in my head, but in real life it didn't. But we had glorious presents. I loved little toy animals and toy figures and toy cars, and was blessed with a vivid imagination to create with Lego little roads and paths and all sorts of scenarios on floors, especially in that sitting room. We were allowed to play in it after Christmas.
Good people, all this Christmas time, consider well and bear in mind what our good God for us has done in sending His beloved Son. With merry holy we should pray to God with love this Christmas day. In Bethlehem upon that morn there was a blessed Messiah born. Near Bethlehem did shepherds keep the flocks of lambs and feeding sheep, to whom God's angels did appear, which put the shepherds in great fear. Prepare and go, the angel said, to Bethlehem. Be not afraid, for there you'll find this happy morn, a princely babe joyful mind, the shepherds went a babe to find, and as God's angels had foretold, they put the Saviour Christ behold within a manger he was laid, and by his side the Virgin Maid, attending on the Lord of life, who came on earth to end all strife. Good people, this Christmas time